And joining us today in our book talk segment of the program, great to welcome, and has written a very interesting book. I think a lot of people are probably having similar experiences. It's called The Late Starters Orchestra. We're joined today by Ari Goldman. You know him from his previous book, The Search for God at Harvard, former New York Times reporter, and currently a professor of journalism at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism in New York. And he joined us by telephone. And Ari, a pleasure to talk to you for a few minutes. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well.
Had a chance to read through the book, and I think a lot of people, I myself, have done something similar. You play an instrument maybe in high school, and then later on in life you try and pick it up again, and you pick one of the harder ones, a cello.
Yeah, and unfortunately I didn't play in high school, but I picked it up as a young adult in my 20s, and I played for a few years, and then just life happened, and job and family and kids, and I put the cello away. But I never got rid of it. I always kept it in the closet until I was approaching 60, and I said, it's time. Now or never. I'm going to go back to that instrument. And I took out the cello as a late starter a second time and began this adventure of learning a difficult instrument at this stage in my life.
Now, did you take a lot of lessons in your early 20s when you first took it up, or just kind of self-taught?
Yeah. I took lessons, and I had a very, very fine teacher. His name was Heinrich Joachim, a German who was very exacting and but also warm and inspiring and encouraging. And what I found was when I came back to the cello 30 years later, Mr. J was still there. He came out of the cello case, and he kept inspiring me. I was inspired by him and also by my young son, who was then playing cello. And between the old man whispering things in my ear, from beyond the grave, to my young son who was in the house and playing his cello, I found a way. I found a way to be good enough to play. First, I played with my son's youth orchestra. I'm 6 feet tall, middle-aged, and I'm sitting with these little kids and doing the best I can, trying to keep up with the little kids. And then I began to audition for orchestras in New York. Now, orchestras in New York, even amateur orchestras, have a pretty high bar. They're not easy to get into. Until I stumbled across the Late Starters Orchestra. It's called the New York Late Starters String Orchestra. And their motto is, if you think you can play, you can play. Their doors are open, and although I knew I was in over my head, I took the plunge. Yeah, and I've been playing ever since.
I was going to say, I grew up in New York, just outside the city in Long Island. I know there's so many places that, not only in the city, but around that area, that if you're a musician, you'll find a group you can fit in with. But I never heard of this particular orchestra before, so you found the right one for yourself.
I found one that was good for me, and where I found people who had the same ambition. And our ambition isn't to be great. It isn't to play Carnegie Hall. It's just to make music, and to make music in a community.
I think your book kind of touches on it, and a lot of people are going through this. Maybe they have worked another job, or maybe find themselves a lot of free time and say, well, let's start up music again. And it's kind of a second chance at life, in a sense, right? Just something you always wanted to do, like a bucket list kind of thing.
Very much, yeah. We've added years to our lifespan. In the last 100 years, we've added 30 years. People lived on average 55 a century ago. Now we're living till 80, 85. We have all these extra years, and we have to design what we want to do with them, what we're going to do with those extra years. And I was always encouraged by that expression, be true to the dreams of your youth. It's funny, on my desk here at school, I have a Ford Mustang, a little model of a Ford Mustang, because when I was a teenager, I loved the Mustang, and I always wanted to drive one. Well, now I've got one on my desk. But I also I loved the music of the cello, and it spoke to me as a youngster, and it continues to speak to me. And rather than just listen to it, I'm now playing it.
How difficult was it to kind of get back into it? I know there's a physical element to it, one of the harder instruments to play, any of those string instruments. But physically difficult, or did you fall right back into it?
No, it was hard, and it takes going back to the basics. So my teacher comes back to me in almost as this ghost who follows me around and reminds me to practice, and tells me to break it down to the basics and play open strings and just hear the music of the cello and become one with the cello and embrace the cello and grow with it. So it was hard. It took a lot of discipline to get back to playing the instrument. But as I said, I was encouraged by the spirit of my old teacher, by my son, and then by this orchestra that I found, the Late Starters Orchestra, which challenged me and made me a better player.
I don't know if you remember watching Jack Benny or even listening to him. He was always kind of kidded about for, always wanting to play the violin, and even later in life. And I think he went around in New York, did a lot of concerts to raise money for orchestras. But you're kind of doing a Jack Benny.
That's right. I remember Jack Benny, and I remember Gracie holding her ears when he would play. And he was a pretty bad violinist, but that didn't stop him. And, we have to be inspired by our own emotions and drive and do the things that speaks to us. Talk about another violinist, Itzhak Perlman, says that the violin is the music of my soul. That works for him, and I'm no Itzhak Perlman, but when I think of the cello, it's the music of my soul. It's the music that touches me the most deeply. And it's a great pleasure to listen to it, but it's a greater pleasure to play it. And my book is about sort of capturing that promise and that dream of your youth. And I recognize, for me, it's the cello, but for someone else it might be learning a language or getting back to painting or getting back on the basketball court or joining an old geezer baseball team. There are just opportunities out there that we should avail ourselves of, and we shouldn't say it's too late, because it's never too late.
Well, it's a great inspirational type of book, and I know it gives you a bit of a respite from your career as a journalist. You had to cover some things that I'm sure were not pleasant, but this kind of gave you kind of a refuge from that, right? Playing music.
Yes, yeah. I was a reporter, and I covered the politics and transportation and crime in New York City. Eventually, I became a religion writer, which wasn't quite as down and dirty as some of the other reporting I had done, but it has its negative aspects as well. And this was just doing something totally different. And turning 60 and saying to my friends and family, you know me in one role, but there's another aspect of me. There's another part of me, and that's the musician in me. And to give that part of me expression, but when I'm alone, when I'm with friends, or when I'm with the Late Starters Orchestra, is just a joy.
Late Starters Orchestra is the name of the book. We've been talking with Ari Goldman today. I know it just came out, doing very well, but give out a website, Ari, for people who want to get a hold of you with the book.
Sure. You could follow me on arigoldman.com, and you could buy the book there. There are links to booksellers. You can also, I encourage people to go to their local bookseller, support independent bookstores, but you can also get it from your favorite booksellers online.
Great. Ari, pleasure to talk to you for a few minutes, and please keep in touch. We'll love to have you on down the road, but thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.